Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to Unboxing 1812, Volume Number 5. I hope you're all doing well. Recently, I acquired a collection of 72 books about the War of 1812. I'm not sure what I just bought, so I thought I would share the joy of discovery with you via the channel here. Now, how this works is, as I remove each book from the box, I'll hold it up and read off the title. And you can let me know in the comments which of these books you would like me to review on 1812 channel, where I have been known to review books. It has happened. It's a historic fact. I have reviewed several books, actually. If you enjoyed today's video, please give it a like, leave a comment, particularly if there's a book you would like me to review, and please consider subscribing to 1812 channel. Let's start a community of people interested in discussing the War of 1812. And so, without further ado, I will start taking the books out of the box. I will hold each one up, read off the titles, and again, you can tell me if there's any of these you would like me to review. So let us begin. And the first one, well, I've got two books here. The first one should be a short book, The United States Army in the War of 1812, by John C. Frederickson, because the United States Army in the War of 1812 didn't do too well. And I can say that because I was born in the United States. That should be a short book, and it is kind of. Terror on the Chesapeake, The War of 1812 on the Bay, by Christopher T. George. Christopher T. George, this must be about the Chesapeake Bay front. I guess that's kind of obvious, isn't it? Oh, here's a heavy one. Nathaniel Philbrick, author of In the Heart of the Sea, The Mayflower. The Mayflower. Well, I guess that's how it kind of all started, but don't know if that's all that relevant to the War of 1812, but I'm sure I'll read this book. Oh, here's a sour-looking puss. Merry Hearts Make Light Days. The War of 1812 Journal of Lieutenant, I almost said Lieutenant, Lieutenant John LeCouture, I'm probably mispronouncing that, 104th Foot, and this was edited by that famous Canadian historian, Donald E. Graves, and I don't know, maybe I was a bit unfair to call the guy a sourpuss. I'm kind of a sourpuss myself, so. Anyways, that's John LeCouture. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Of the 104th Foot, which was a New Brunswick regiment. Those are probably the guys that walked 2,000 miles from New Brunswick to Kingston. It's actually an incredible story. Aha, a ruinous and unhappy war. Well, that's a good description of the War of 1812. New England in the War of 1812, and this is by James H. Ellis, and it's kind of hard to argue with James's sentiment there. And there's a picture of some sailors fighting on one of the ships there. I don't know, doesn't say which one it is. A boarding party has come aboard. I don't know how well you can see that. And there's John there on the back. I agree with you. James, pardon me. Pardon me. I need more coffee this morning. This video is turning into a bit of a fiasco, which is good because my next book is Florida Fiasco. Rampant Rebels in the Georgia-Florida Border, 1810 to 1815, by Rembert W. Patrick. Now that's an interesting name. Rembert W. Patrick. Because Canadian listeners probably don't understand, and I didn't understand till I got into this, that a lot of the War of 1812 was actually fought in the American Southeast, and Americans versus Spaniards versus the English, who had some bases there, versus the local native people. So that was an important front of the war. It's a related conflict, often referred to as the Creek War. So, and speaking of which, struggle for the Gulf borderlands, the Creek War and the Battle of New Orleans, 1812 to 1815. And this is by Frank Lawrence Owsley Jr. Frank Lawrence Owsley Jr. Again, I'm probably mispronouncing that name, and I always complain when hosts on YouTube mispronounce names, but that was the first time I saw it. This hasn't been rehearsed. You can tell. Andrew Jackson. We're back on the same topic. We got a lot of stuff on this topic. Andrew Jackson and His Indian Wars by Robert V. Remini. I found a book by his in the last my last unboxing video. Robert V. Remini. Andrew Jackson and His Indian Wars. And there's a picture of Andrew on the cover, probably with one of the Creek warrior chiefs. Oh, I got 2 volumes here. I think. No, just, I have British Redcoat, Volume 2, 1793 to 1815, which is the period of the Napoleonic Wars, which also covers the War of 1812. And I have British Rifleman. You know, think of Sharp's rifles. British Rifleman, 1797 to 1815. British Rifleman. Wonder if there's a volume 1. Oh, here's kind of a related book. Waterloo, 1815. Waterloo, 1815, because when Napoleon met his Waterloo, the War of 1812 is over by that point, but if it hadn't been, the minute Napoleon met his Waterloo, that would have been the end of the War of 1812. The end. My goodness, more Waterloo. Waterloo, the 100 Days. And this is by Dr. A.L. Rouse. A.L. Rouse. And this book, this book is by British Redcoats is by Stuart, Reid, pardon me. British Rifleman is by Philip, and I'm not even going to pronounce that long last name. And this one here is by Geoffrey Wooten. Pardon me for not reading out the authors' names. Here's some small little booklets, and I like these kind of booklets because you often find information you don't get anywhere else. Here's Fort Erie, 1764 to 1823, a historic guide by David A. Owen. David A. Owen. 1802 clothing regulations. Well, that's about the time I bought most of the clothes in my wardrobe, 1802 clothing regulations. So I better read that one. The Royal Newfoundland Regiment Bicentennial Booklet, The War of 1812, because the Royal Newfoundland Regiment was often involved in the fighting in what was then Upper Canada, which is today Ontario. They were often used as sailors because most people from Newfoundland had some familiarity with the sea, a lot of familiarity. Mark Urban, Generals, 10 British Commanders Who Shaped the World. And this is by Mark Urban. And no doubt Wellington is in here. Whether there is any other War of 1812 kind of figures, I don't know. I'll have to check into that. But let me know if you would like me to review generals so you can find out which generals are in here. Oh, now this book, it's not about a general, but it's about a very, 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 very famous man. We all know. The Last Lion, Winston Churchill, 1874 to 1932, Visions of Glory by William Manchester. And look at the size of that book. Wow. William Manchester. Winston himself in his red uniform, red coat. He was a cavalryman, I believe. Splintering the Wooden Wall, the British Blockade of the United States, 1812 to 1815, by Wade G. Dudley. Wade G. Dudley. Here's another weighty tome. Oh, well, I've actually listened to the audiobook of the first part of this trilogy. Here's The Day of Battle, the War in Sicily and Italy, 1943 to 1944, Volume 2 of the Liberation Trilogy by Rick Atkinson. I have listened to an audiobook of the first part of that trilogy An Army at Dawn by Rick Atkinson. Doesn't have much to do on the War of 1812, but there'll be a lot about the Canadian Army and its liberation of Italy during World War II. It was one of the main fighters. Here we go. We got Winston again. Winston in America, 1895 to 1961. An Affectionate Portrait by Robert H. Pilpel. Robert H. Pilpel. My parents almost named me Winston. I kind of wish they did. Well, and here we go. Volume 2. We got Volume 1, and now we have Volume 2. The last line, Winston Spencer Churchill, Alone, 1932 to 1940. 1932 to 1940, again by William Manchester. When Churchill was a truth teller of truths that people did not want to hear. And now it's empty. That's the last box. So here are my collection of, part of my collection of the 72 books that I bought. Thank you for joining me in unboxing the books and enjoying my joy of discovery with this. Again, if you like this somewhat, pardon me, it's early in the morning, somewhat incoherent video, please give it a like. If you want me to review any of these books, even if they're not particularly about the War of 1812, let me know in the comments below. And please consider subscribing to 1812 channel. I'd like to start a community here of people interested in discussing the War of 1812, but I can't do it on my own. I need you. It'll only work if you join me. So please subscribe. And remember, when the barrage lifts, cheers.